So I wanted to wait until we got news on the Giannis situation before I wanted to make my series predictions, because obviously if he plays, it really swings the outcome of this series. I mean, he's one of the best players in the league for a reason. His ability to drive the rim, his defensive ability, we all know how great Giannis is. So I wanted to wait to see what the situation was. As of today, it's around 10:30 when I'm recording this. It says he's doubtful for Game 1, which means he probably won't play today. And there's a good possibility he won't play Game 2. So I think at worst, he'll come back Game 3, maybe even Game 2. Which, given the injury that happened, and because it was the same injury Joel Embiid suffered back in March, and he was out 4 weeks, I thought Giannis was probably going to be done for the playoffs. But maybe he wasn't affected as much as Joel Embiid, or it's the finals and he really does need a 4-week time frame. But this might be the only chance the Bucks have winning a championship, and you're going to risk it so you get the ring. Which I don't completely disagree on that statement, especially given the state of the Eastern Conference going forward. So maybe he should be on a 4-week timetable, but the time to win is now, and so you're going to take advantage of it. So when he comes back, he's obviously not going to be 100% because, this knee hyperextensions usually take 2 to 4 weeks. I don't even think we've reached the 2-week threshold yet. Maybe we're coming close. I know it happened in Game 4, but I don't know the calendar dates, how they lined up. But it's safe to assume he probably won't be 100%. So his game's going to be affected. I think he'll still be able to attack the rim, but maybe he won't have that extra quick burst of speed that he usually has, and maybe that can affect him a bit. I don't think offensively it'll affect him as much. And then defensively, they never use him as an on-ball primary defender. He's more of a free safety kind of a roamer kind of guy. So he won't be as affected by his injury than, let's say, Trae Young and James Harden, whose games predicate on long range, and any lower body injury can affect how much push they can put on the ball. But I could see his efficiency still dropping a bit because his speed attacking the rim isn't quite there, and especially since Phoenix does have long and athletic defenders to keep in front of him, it may take him a bit more effort to get to his spots, but it won't be as detrimental to his team as maybe James Harden was in the Nets-Bucks series, but I could still see him easily struggling because, it is a significant knee injury that he hasn't fully recovered 100%. So let's say Giannis isn't available for Game 1. So the offensive load will go on to Jrue Holiday and Chris Middleton, who, in Giannis' absence, did a sensational job leading the Bucks to victory. Obviously, they lost Game 4 by a lot, but they were already losing at that point. So for Game 5, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, and Jrue Holiday all dropped 25-plus points. Plus, they got 22 from Bobby Portis. And in Game 6, we got another great game from Holiday and Middleton, who both dropped 27 and 32 respectively. So even though they were struggling throughout these playoffs, they couldn't really find their shot consistently, especially Jrue Holiday, who really didn't have a standout game until Giannis got hurt. Him stepping up in that role. I think he had 9 assists in Game 6, and then he had double-digit assists in Game 5. So him being able to score and set up teammates was huge in Giannis' absence, and they're going to need to do that, especially in Game 1 and 2, and they're probably going to have to carry a bit more of the load offensively, especially with Giannis, essentially just jumping into the finals after a 2-week absence and still not being 100%. So in terms of this matchup, I don't think it was it wasn't a matchup most people expected going into these playoffs, but I think it's a good matchup nonetheless. The Bucks and Suns were one of the best teams in the league this season. Bucks finished with the 3rd seed, and Phoenix finished with the 2 seed. And both games these two teams played were amazing. The Bucks lost by a combined 2 points. They lost 1 point earlier in the season, then they lost in overtime another game. I remember watching that game, and that was amazing. I remember Devin Booker hit a bunch of clutch shots, and it was a back and forth affair, as you would see, but by no means are these teams, unevenly matched. They both have 2 superstars. I would say Devin Booker's a superstar in the making. Giannis has already established himself as a top 5 player in the league. You have 2 other all-stars on the roster, Chris Paul and Chris Middleton, and then you have what I like to call pseudo all-stars. I think Jrue Holiday is a better pseudo all-star than DeAndre Ayton, but obviously but Chris Paul's better than Chris Middleton. And then surrounding those guys, you just have a bunch of dudes who can play defense and shoot the ball. On Milwaukee's side, you have PJ Tucker, Bobby Portis, Brook Lopez is more of a rim protector, but he can still shoot the ball. Bryn Forbes isn't that great of a defender, but he's an elite three-point shooter when he's on. And then Pat Connaughton. And then on Phoenix's side, you have Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, Cam Johnson. Cameron Payne's been coming off the bench for them. So they both have guys surrounding these dudes who can kind of create their own shot, but also serve as complementary shooters and defenders around these two stars. So the most interesting battle, I would say, I think the most interesting battle for this series honestly has to be the Brook Lopez and DeAndre Ayton matchup. And I know what you're thinking. This series features Devin Booker, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Chris Paul. How is that the most interesting matchup? Well, it's probably going to be the biggest X factor matchup because both of these centers aren't elite offensively. DeAndre Ayton's more of a roller rim runner who just finishes at the rim, while Brook Lopez has the ability to post stuff, but he obviously doesn't do that as much anymore, and he's more of a guy who works in the pick and pop game and stretches out the floor. But the real impact will be on defensively. So we saw in the Hawks series how the Bucks were able to adjust to the Trae Young / John Collins, Clint Capella pick and roll, and as they realized Brook Lopez was able to play on more, kind of prevent both the lob and the floater, and he's able to stay in the series. So can he stay in the series in the Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton pick and roll? Will Budenholzer and Will Brook will be able to drop enough to where you can prevent the lob and the Chris Paul mid-range? Because Trae Young likes to attack more in the paint when he's in the pick and roll, while Chris Paul loves settling for that mid-range, and he predicates that game based on teams playing drop coverage. And then DeAndre Ayton, we saw how the Clippers' small ball lineup wasn't as effective against them because DeAndre Ayton could play on the perimeter, unlike Rudy Gobert. So there's going to be that little chess match, which defense can you penetrate easier between the Bucks and the Suns? If I had to go one off of just prediction, I would say the Bucks would be easier to penetrate because not only is Giannis not at 100% health, but Brook Lopez, it's kind of easier to find your zones, the open spots in drop coverage than it is to, let's say, DeAndre Ayton, who can throw an array at you. He can double, he can switch, he can drop himself. He has the agility and mobility to where Phoenix can play different coverages, so Milwaukee's just not seeing the same thing. So, and that'll also be going on Monty Williams and Coach Bud. This chess match of kind of out adjusting each other. We know what Monty Williams has done in Phoenix, and I have to commend Mike Budenholzer on his job on the last two series. I wasn't a big Budenholzer guy. I thought, maybe they should have fired him because he's not a head coach you can win a championship with. But he was able to adjust in the Atlanta series with his adjustments to the pick and roll coverage, having Brook Lopez play a bit on more, having his rotation. He cut down his rotations by a lot. I think he only ran, I want to say he ran 8 deep, but I could be wrong. I'm going to check real quick. Yeah, he only ran really 7 deep in Game 6, and Bryn Forbes played less than 15 minutes, so Pat Connaughton was the only big bench player who played for them in Game 6, so he was shorting his rotations. He was adjusting to what the Atlanta Hawks and Brooklyn Nets were giving him. And I have to commend him. He's done a really good job coaching, and he's kind of elevated his game in these playoffs. So it's going to be that chess match between Monty Williams and Coach Bud trying to counter each other, find the weak spots in these teams' lineups, which they don't really have a lot of weak spots, either one of these teams. So another thing I want to talk about, and I kind of mentioned this a bit when I was talking about Giannis, but it'll be interesting to see how Phoenix can deploy the defensive wall, because we know obviously if you put a bunch of guys in front of the rim when you're playing against Giannis, it affects his game significantly. We saw this in the Miami Heat series last year. Toronto did the same thing to him 2 years ago. Boston's done it to him in the past. So if you give him a defensive wall, he's obviously not going to be as effective because he doesn't have a consistent jump shot, and he isn't the best playmaker either. So now, he hasn't had to face a wall of defenders that could stop him. I mean, Miami was essentially beaten down when they played them this season, and then Brooklyn obviously doesn't have that many good defenders. They didn't really have a defender put against them, and Atlanta really only had Okongwu, Capella, and John Collins, but even then, you can only play 2 of those guys at the same time, and sometimes only even 1. So, but the Phoenix Suns team does have defenders you can throw at him. They have, in their starting 5, they have Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, DeAndre Ayton. All of them, I think Crowder and Bridges are at least 6'6", maybe even taller. Jay Crowder's like 6'8" himself, and then DeAndre Ayton's obviously 7 foot with great mobility. So that's already 3 guys you can kind of put at him. Also, Chris Paul, despite his size, is still a good post defender and paint defender, at least for his size. So that's another body you can throw in there. And then coming off the bench, you have Cam Johnson. So at least you can have another body. So that's potentially 4 or 5 bodies you can have throwing at Giannis at once. And if you have 3, especially with his knee injury, that could be the difference in this series. Really, when I'm looking down to this series comes down to 2 things. Obviously, Giannis' health. If he's not 100%, they're not going to win this. But given how close these teams played earlier, it's really going to come down to who among the role players is just going to hit more shots. Is Jay Crowder, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Dario Saric, Cam Payne, are they going to hit more of their shots, or is it going to be Pat Connaughton, Bobby Portis, PJ Tucker, who has struggled this postseason, Brook Lopez, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, even, because they haven't been consistent in these playoffs. So it's going to come down to, can Giannis stay 100%, and who is going to just outshoot each other? I know that's kind of stupid, but makes sense. So if I had to make a prediction, I'm going to go Suns in 6. I think this is a very even match, but with Giannis' injury, him potentially missing at least 1 game, if not 2, going along with the fact that he will not be 100% coming back. And I think Phoenix is just slightly more deep of a team than Milwaukee. I think in terms of star power, Milwaukee might have Phoenix beat, but once you get to the 4th, 5th, 6th guys, I think I trust Phoenix more than I trust Milwaukee more, because they're a bit more two-dimensional than Milwaukee's guys. So Phoenix in 6, I think it's going to be a great series. I'm glad Giannis is going to be hopefully playing at least a couple of these games, because if he wasn't playing, then I feel like Phoenix would cakewalk over this team, and it would kind of invalidate their championship, which I know they had a easier path because of all the injuries, but they still did their job. They still were given they were still dealt the same hand as everyone else. And it's the same situation that happened last year with the Heat and the Lakers. People try invalidating that, but they did their job. Why couldn't other teams do it? But I'd say Suns in 6. If Giannis is healthy and is playing close to his ability, I think this is going to be a great series. I'm excited to finally see at least one of these teams win their first championship in a while, because I always like in sports when teams kind of break curses or end championship droughts. I feel like it's good for whatever sport, regardless of what's going on. So that'll do it for this video. Bucks, Suns should be a great series, and I'm out. Peace.